And we're off. Hi, welcome to Faith and Count. This is class number 211. Tonight is Gimmel Tammuz. I wasn't going to talk about Gimmel Tammuz per se. You want me to be more centered?
No, look into the camera.
Look into the camera. I have my stage director here. Okay, look into the camera and smile. And show your teeth. I got a lot of directions here. So we'll talk a little about that. But what I was really going to talk about was something that I found useful again, and what I found inspiring and and helpful is in the last 2 weeks we went through two.
I'm going to talk a lot about Gimmel Tammuz.
Oh, good.
Okay.
If you don't know, Gimmel Tammuz has three important things that happened on three Gimmel Tammuz. First was in your time of you're going to say that already? Okay. So okay. I'm not going to step on my wife's there. Okay, so she's going to cover that. But there is, if you want to come tomorrow night, there'll be a big public gathering at Basement Menachem Mendel in Newton, and there'll be a guest speaker. The head shliach of England is coming, Rabbi Shmulu, and I'll probably be there. So with hundreds of other people. So, okay. So last week was Parshas Korach. The week before was Parshas Shalach about the spies. And the two really fit. I never really put it together, but the two are like two bookends, two things and teachings in life that we learn, not from necessarily what they wanted to do, but more like, no, don't go that direction, which is sometimes more useful actually in terms of helping you understand how to navigate the pitfalls of life. So as we know, the spies, they were handpicked by Moshe, and they came back with a report that, not only they were supposed to check out to see if they could, conquer the land. They came back a report, we're not going to be able to conquer the land, which they weren't asked for their opinion, but they gave it anyway. And even God couldn't conquer this land. It's really filled with giants and so forth. And everybody panicked, and the Jews were punished, and and this is the usual understanding. And then they had to wander for 40 years in the desert until that generation passed away. Just, bad people caused the panic, caused it inspired people to also do bad, and it just was a bad scene. The Rebbe says not so quick here. I mean, what do you need to? You don't need to have a whole parsha talking about this to tell you that some people misbehave. It's just not it's not new, and it doesn't seem to have much of a lesson. The other thing is that they were handpicked by Moshe. Moshe knew who they were. He knew what kind of people they were. He knew, and they were the top leaders of the generation. So he says the lesson has to be a much more important lesson, and one that is applicable even today, not just there were some bad people in the past, and so what? So you might have heard this before, but the Alter Rebbe was the first one to actually pick up on this. He says, actually, what the spies were afraid of was succeeding. They thought, we'll be able to do it. This is great. We will succeed, of course, because God does miracles for us. Of course he knows. We saw all these miracles. If any generation knew that God does miracles, it was this generation. They saw the 10 plagues. They saw the sea split. They saw everything else. Of course they thought they were not going to have a problem conquering the land. They said, but what happens when we get there? What's going to be then? That was their worry. You see, in the wilderness, they lived a really angelic life. They were literally in the clouds of glory. Everything was taken care of for them. They didn't have to go looking for food. It fell out of the sky for them. They didn't have to worry about washing their clothes. The clothes were taking care of them. Everything in the entire day was taken care of for them. In fact, the food that they ate, the mun, it didn't cause, it was completely absorbed in the body, so they didn't have to go to the bathroom. So they saved so many hours a day, they didn't even have to go to the bathroom. It was really a marvelous situation. Says the first time they had to go to the bathroom was when they came to the Baal Peor, and they ate those foods from the Moabite women, and then they had to go to the bathroom in front of the idols. So they didn't, it was a wonderful life. Didn't no worries. Actually, it reminds me, I forgot the story, but it just reminded me of a story that I read in a magazine once. There was this a Jewish guy, mathematician, brilliant mathematician. I assume he was Jewish, but from the story, it's clear he must have been. Never got married, never had a house, never had a job. Brilliant mathematician. You know how he survived his whole life? He had friends in different universities, and he would come and say, "Can I stay with you for a couple days?" And he would stay and live in their house, and he would give classes at the university, and he would help the person solve his math problems and publish. I would collaborate with you, and he was brilliant, and everybody wanted him to come because it was a great opportunity to get some free labor and some research and some help. So he would stick around for a week, 2 weeks, whatever it was, until the wife actually got tired of having this freeloader in the house and doing his clothing and getting meals for him. And so they would kick him out and he would go somewhere else, another university, somewhere else in the world. And that's his life. He spent his whole life doing that. A wonderful life. Never had to worry about marriage, didn't have to worry about food, didn't have to worry about never did an IRS tax form, never, he just lived purely in the mathematics. They were basically saying, this is wonderful life. If we have to go in the land of Israel, it's going to eat us up. Meaning that when you get involved in things in the physical world and you have to shop and you have to buy and you have to get clothing and you have to take care of things and you have to go to the doctor and you have to it just consumes you and you have no free time and no free mental ability to live on a higher level. And in the wilderness, they ate the mun, and it says that the Torah had to be given to a generation that ate the mun because it sort of purified you. It purified your mind and everything else. So we want to stay in that level and so forth. And basically, they got their wish. They got to stay in the wilderness. And so they weren't really punished about this. They got exactly what they wanted. But God was not happy with this situation because God was saying basically, I made human beings to get involved in this world and to transform the world. It's not the mission for you to live a heavenly life the rest of your life. Your mission is to try and do something to be able to transform the world. In other words, to spiritualize the material. That's why I'm giving you the land of Israel. That's why you have to be politicians, and you have to have policemen, and you have to have crossing guards, and you have to have teachers and all this other kind of stuff. So you got the mission wrong. You went, you're trying to be too spiritual. And if you look around, they had a good argument, Look at Judaism, Judaism is the only religion that really the nation was established not because of a land. Most countries they establish because they have a land, they all live together, and they decide they have to make laws and make a king and make leaders and so forth in order to be able to survive in a land. The Jewish nation was formed by an idea living in the wilderness. It's an ideology. It's not about living in a land. But then God said, no, it also is about, very much being involved in a physical world. But, they had a point. They just took it too much to an extreme. Yeah. So we'll see that extreme. So because we're going to go now to the other side. Korach heard this story and he said, I get it. Doing is the main thing. Living in the land, doing the mitzvahs, practical stuff, doing that. In that case, I'm coming to you, Moshe, and I'm saying, why are you lifting yourself up? Why do you and Aaron think that you're higher than anybody else? When it comes to doing the practical doing of a mitzvah, there's no difference between one girl and another girl lighting the candles. It doesn't matter how much she knows, how much she understands, how much spiritual is, and so forth like that. It's an act, and acts equalize everybody. So there's no reason for you, Moshe and Aaron, to take these exalted positions. Not that there shouldn't be people who are teachers and some who are students. There is sort of a hierarchy, but not that kind of a hierarchy of somebody who's like a leader of the generation, the leader of the whole people, somebody who's a prophet, who's beyond everybody else, who inspires the rest of the nation. We're all just doing things, okay? It's not about your inspiration. It's not about your spirituality. It's about doing. And this became also an ideology you see even today. There are many people go around and say, it really doesn't matter about your feelings and whether you're inspired about Judaism and whether you're excited about it. Just do the mitzvahs. Keep kosher. Keep Taras Mishpacha. Keep Shabbos. Do it. And if you don't feel like doing it, well, your grandfather didn't feel like doing it either, but we did what we had to do. And take care of your mother and take care of your father and just do what you're supposed to do. And the act is the main thing, and maybe you'll get a reward in the world to come. And this is also too far to the other side. So in Judaism, in halacha, we have this idea, if there's two ideas that contradict each other, one is too far one and the other, then there has to come the middle way to really resolve the problem. We needed both of these stories to basically understand that that either side going too far towards action or too far towards spirituality is not the right direction. Too far, and there, we have Jewish movements today. I was just looking it up. I did a Google for what are the Jewish movements, active today? There was Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, but of course there was also a Reconstructionist. So I read up, what do Reconstructionists think? And then what do Jewish Renewal? You ever hear of Jewish Renewal? I've met Jewish Renewal people, and some are very spiritual people, very interesting, very creative about their Yiddishkeit and so forth. But, practical doing, the mitzvahs, that kind of stuff doesn't appeal to them. And I remember Alti Booker telling me once he was once at a Shabbaton with these people, and he said it was amazing. They could spend, 5 hours just, singing in a circle around and round and round and round. They're really quite impressive. On the other hand, though, they said that, they were doctors, they were lawyers, they were business people and stuff like that, very high-powered people, but they didn't know what to do when they went back home. They just said, how do I take this spirituality that I had for the weekend and bring it home? So, yeah, Judaism is about taking physical and bringing it into the spiritual and bringing it in. So realizing that sometimes just taking care, like if you're a nurse, taking care of your patient, that can be an extremely spiritual event. Doing and helping somebody with the food on Shabbos and so forth can be an extremely spiritual event. It's practical, it's grounding, and it's also extremely spiritual. And that is, in a nutshell, what a leader helps us do. Because by ourselves, it's sort of hard to be able to see how the material world can be fused together with the spiritual. So we need somebody who's a pure soul to come and teach us and to inspire us and to give us the lessons to be able to understand this. One could say that in a certain way, the Shulchan Aruch came to answer about the spies. They didn't understand about grounding themselves in practical mitzvahs. And that a Rebbe and Chassidus and prayer comes to be able to help us be able to tune in to the spiritual in the world. And I'll finish with 2 stories from the Rebbe about how the Rebbe, because that, of course, Gimmel Tammuz is very much connected with the idea of a Rebbe. And we are very much, we've missed the Rebbe, and of course we need his direction, but of course he's very much still with us and directing us. So what is a Rebbe? So if you ask some people about a Rebbe is somebody who connects you with God. And so you think of him as an intermediary, but in Judaism, we don't have intermediaries. Really what a Rebbe is somebody from behind who's pushing you, saying, you have spirituality, you can do it, I believe in you. And those people can have a big effect on your life because sometimes you don't believe in yourself. And he says, I know you can do it. I know there's more inside of you than you think you have. So here's the stories. I just looked out for in Kalman's book for a couple of stories that I thought would be appropriate for this.
Who's Collinson?
Mendel Kalmanson wrote this book, Positivity Bias. He has a lot of good Rebbe stories. I highly recommend the book if you ever get a chance. Anyway, so I'll give you a flavor of some of the stories that I haven't told here before, because I've told a lot of the stories. I've told some of the stories already. Have you ever heard of Alan Dershowitz, the famous Harvard law professor? Yeah. Anyway, so he wrote in once to the Rebbe saying, I don't understand why you are so chummy with politicians sometimes. And some of them are really disgusting people. And he gave the Rebbe over the head, in the letter, really a nasty little letter. And then later he felt bad about it, but he got an answer back from the Rebbe and said, I don't take any offense. He says, let me explain to you how I treat politicians. He says, in general, most people, I don't push them away. It's not my job to push them away. And especially politicians, because most politicians are not motivated by any real, true, firm ideology. They're exploitative and they move with that, whatever the wins, whatever the situation is. That's their position at that particular time. And I find that if you're patient with them and listen to them, you can have an effect on them. And Dershowitz saw this and he said, I have to apologize to the Rebbe because, at first I was writing into the Rebbe saying he's such an anti-Semite. And by the end of his career, he was like one of the most positive on Israel of anybody in Congress. He had other problems. We didn't, Dershowitz says, I don't agree with a lot of the things he does. But on this point, I can appreciate the Rebbe's approach, not to push people away, to push people forward, to give them encouragement, and to see, give them the opportunity to show what they could possibly do. Another short story along these lines was there was once a bacher in the yeshiva, and he was having a tremendous amount of trouble learning. And he went to his Rosh Yeshiva, and he opened up his heart, and the Rosh Yeshiva tried to make him feel better. He says, I see, you try very hard, but not everybody is cut out to be a top flight academic scholar. You're trying very hard. You're very sincere, but maybe that's not your role. Maybe your role is to be a businessman, and you are supposed to help support people who study Torah. And he went back to his room, and his roommate saw him, and he said, I'm more depressed than ever now before. Because basically you're telling me, there are first class and there's second class, and I'm just stuck in second class. So this guy said, what, try the Lubavitcher Rebbe, see what he has to say. The Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote him back and basically said, every soul comes down here with a unique mission in life. And the mission is to serve Hashem. And everyone has their particular way. And they can't, you can't switch your role, because God has decided this is what you really are best suited for. And it means basically that there is no such thing as first class and second class. Everyone is being first class when they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And when you're fulfilling what you are capable of doing, and you're doing it honestly with your abilities, with your situation that you're in, then you're first class in God's eye, and He doesn't need you to be something else, as I've said many times before. And the guy got it; he understood. And the third story is also sort of related to that. It was a rabbi named Avram Glick, and he was an educator and a teacher. And he was very good at it, but of course you get promoted. So he became like the principal, and he found most of the day he was handing out discipline and handing discipline issues at the school. And he wrote into the Rebbe and said, I think I missed my calling here. I don't think I've got the right job. I don't think I'm doing the right thing. And the Rebbe wrote him back interestingly and said, one of the 39 malachas that are forbidden on Shabbos is plowing. And you wonder, why is plowing forbidden? Because normally it's things that you construct on Shabbos that's forbidden. And plowing is destroying, and destroying, at least according to the Torah, is not considered a malacha, a work on Shabbos, if you just rip or destroy something. So he says the reason why plowing is one of the 39 malachas, 39 works that are not allowed on Shabbos, is because it's actually part of the preparation for planting. And since it's part of the preparation, it also is part of the planting. And therefore, what you're doing is helping plow the ground so that the kids are receptive and maybe able to listen in class. So don't think that you're not. You're actually very much involved in teaching. So this is a Rebbe. A Rebbe looks at the story a little differently than we do and helps us open our eyes and to be able to see, what we're doing right now is pretty good. I was going to use a stronger term, but I bit my tongue. It's really, we just don't see it. We think that somebody else is really the ones that are successful, and you really have a lot to be proud about yourself. And I think that's a good message for Gimmel Tammuz and for all of us, is what a Rebbe is giving us kohos and powers, and we can really do it. And all the challenges that we've had and we've never been able to get over before, you have another day, another opportunity, another opportunity on this earth. And you know what? This time, we're really going to be able to accomplish. And with that, I will switch over the camera to my inspiration here. Okay. And
can I ask a question, please?
You
Yes.
may ask a question. Yes.
Okay, I don't remember the source, but I heard in classes about a week ago that um, maybe it's in stages of
Don't,
No, I'm just turning up the computer microphone.
Oh, okay.
So I can hear her better.
Okay, because if you don't want to be heard.
No, I want to, yeah, that's
Okay,
it,
fine.
I want
Okay.
to hear Golda better.
Okay,
so
good.
it,
Yep.
so recording is off, right?
Oh, you want recording paused? We couldn't do that.
Yes, I want recording.
You want to pause the recording? Okay. So remember to turn it back on, Shalom.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Okay, so I'm happy to see all of you again. And let me just move this a little bit. Okay, good. Happy to see everybody. And wonderful. So does anybody have any questions before I begin? I'm going to talk about Gimmel Tammuz, and I'm going to tell a couple of very short stories.
See each other tomorrow. I actually had a very good birthday, except my brother.
Okay, so I'm ready to begin. And okay, here we go. So I'm going to start with the four things that I always begin with. Number one, we're in a remarkable time. Lubavitcher Rebbe, who is never wrong about any public pronouncement, told us that we are in the unraveling of the redemption, that the redemption has already begun. And the Rebbe was never wrong about anything. Number two, all of us, all the Jews here our souls were handpicked to be at this time in human history because we have each one of us has a critical role to play. Number three, we have all the tools we need. We have the Torah, which is our guidebook, our infallible guidebook, and we also have the mitzvahs, which are our power tools. And number four, what we're doing tonight, learning about the redemption. The Rebbe explained that that's the fastest tool to speed up the redemption. Okay, so I want to talk first about Gimmel Tammuz. So this date 30 years ago was the date of the Rebbe's funeral, and it was supposed to be my first date with Haskell Shimon. It's very interesting, and we ended up not meeting on that day. We ended up meeting 5 days later, but the Rebbe's action did not stop on Gimmel Tammuz. In fact, the opposite happened. And the most interesting thing, I'm going to close that door. The most interesting thing about Gimmel Tammuz is that 3 years before Gimmel Tammuz, on Gimmel Tammuz 1991, 3 years before the Gimmel Tammuz, the Rebbe gave a talk explaining what Gimmel Tammuz, the date of Gimmel Tammuz, is all about. And it was totally remarkable. It's like my father passed away on Ches Cheshvan. It's like my father leaving me a note years before he passed away about what the date Ches Cheshvan is all about. So anyway, what the Rebbe said about Gimmel Tammuz is truly remarkable. He said that all Gimmel Tammuzes, all Gimmel Tammuzes share a commonality. They have a common thread. And he said, he brought out 2 Gimmel Tammuzes. His Gimmel Tammuz is the third Gimmel Tammuz. What happened 3 years later? So the 2 Gimmel Tammuzes that he mentioned are, number one, the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested in Russia for teaching Judaism, right? Like all the Rebbes, every single Jewish Rebbe, every single one of the Lubavitcher Rebbes, including our Rebbe, was arrested for teaching Judaism. Some were beaten and tortured and the whole 9 yards. The Frierdiker Rebbe, I think his and the Alter Rebbe's were the worst of the imprisonments. But anyway, so the Frierdiker Rebbe was put through the ringer when he was arrested, and in 1927, and on Gimmel Tammuz, he was he was actually he had been under a death sentence, and on Gimmel Tammuz, he was informed that he was going to be, and he was sent that day instead of prison, he was released from prison and sent to exile in a far-flung city. And then eventually, not long afterwards, 9 days afterwards, the Russian government all of a sudden decided you're free completely. And he was freed completely on the 12th of Tammuz. And from that day on, the 12th of Tammuz became a huge holiday in Lubavitch. Okay. The second thing that happened on Gimmel Tammuz is that in the time of Yehoshua, who was the successor Yehoshua was the successor to Moshe Rabbeinu. In the time of Yehoshua, when he was battling in Israel, when the Jews were conquering Israel, there was a particular battle that was a very stubborn battle. And if you know the story of Yehoshua, he on Gimmel Tammuz, he told the son, "Listen, son, we're battling these people. I think it was the Gibeonites, something like that." And the Jews were prevailing, but the sun was about to set. And Yehoshua said to the sun, "Stop. Shemesh begivon dom." Stop. He didn't say stop. You know what he said? He said, "Be quiet." Why did he say be quiet? Because when the sun and the constellations are doing their thing, they're going in their circuits, that is their song to Hashem. They're singing to Hashem. So he didn't have to say stop. He said, Dom, be quiet, which means it has to be still because its song is its circuit. So anyway, and he ordered the sun to be still. The sun was still, and it remained overhead until Yehoshua and the Jewish soldiers had defeated the enemy, and then it continued its normal course. So in both of these things, let's go back to the Frierdiker Rebbe. When the Frierdiker Rebbe was released to an exile town instead of being in a horrible jail, the Jews didn't celebrate that Gimmel Tammuz because they didn't know. We don't know if this is going to end up well. He's still under the Russian authorities. They could change their mind at any second. So they didn't really. Then 9 days later, when he was released completely, it was apparent that, you know what? That Gimmel Tammuz was a good thing. It was the first step in his ultimate release. So the Rebbe says in the beginning of the Sikha, in the very first os, he says a remarkable thing, and please open your hearts to this. The Rebbe says that Gimmel Tammuz is the beginning of the redemption, but it's the type of beginning that will only be apparent in hindsight. Can you imagine? He's saying that about the day that 3 years later would become his yahrzeit. Yeah, he said Gimmel Tammuz is the beginning of the redemption, but it's the type of beginning that is only apparent. It's only going to be apparent in hindsight. That it's from hindsight. And just like with his father-in-law, they figured out, oh, Gimmel Tammuz, maybe they'll take him back. Maybe this won't work out. But then 9 days later, they saw, no, this does work out. He is released. This was the beginning of his redemption. And the Frierdiker Rebbe's redemption was what started the ball rolling for the whole unraveling of communism and the eventual release of all the Jews from Russia. Okay, good. So what about the thing with Yehoshua stopping the sun? It's also very clarifying about our Gimmel Tammuz, what our Gimmel Tammuz, the Rebbe's yahrzeit is all about. Yehoshua did a very weird thing. Why did he ask the sun to stop? If you're going to ask for a miracle because you want to win a battle, doesn't it make more sense to ask Hashem, win this war for us? We're the good guys. Just take over. If you're going to ask for a miracle, why don't you ask for the whole 9 yards? Why do you just ask for one detail so you can continue fighting the battle? And so the answer is that Hashem wants, and Yehoshua knew, that the battle is the Jews' battle. The battle is not Hashem's battle. The battle is the Jews' battle. This is the job that was given to us. We want Hashem's assistance, and we ask for miracles, and we ask for tremendous assistance. But in the end, it's the Jews' job to win this battle. So, and Hashem wants that for the Jews' own sake. He wants the Jews to win the battle. He wants the Jews to bring Mashiach. He wants it for us. As Rebbe said in his Sikha, a person. It says in the Torah that not in the Chumash, but it says somewhere in the Torah that A person naturally likes one portion that he made himself as opposed to 9 portions that somebody else made and gave to him. A person likes what they accomplish themselves. That's what makes them the happiest. And Hashem is allowing us that enormous pleasure. And when he decided to make the entire world, he made it as a partnership. When he talked to the Jewish souls before he made the world, he made it clear this is a partnership. Are you in? Do you want this? I want to make a gorgeous world, and I want you to fill it with goodness and bring Mashiach. And that's going to be your job, and I'm not going to take it away from you. So the analogy to our Gimmel Tammuz is clear. So it's stunning. This day became the Rebbe's yahrzeit. How could the Rebbe say 3 years earlier that Gimmel Tammuz is the beginning of the redemption, but it'll only be apparent in hindsight? And one answer is that when the Jews, particularly when the Lubavitchers, could see the Rebbe was and is a phenomenal miracle worker. You know, the miracles are, I don't think they're in the thousands. I think they're in the millions. If I myself have had multiple miracles with the Rebbe, and my friends and my friends' friends, and it's and people here too. Everybody. So it's unbelievable how many miracles. So when we could see the Rebbe, we could see the Son, we could see our Son. Then everybody was like, okay, the Rebbe will do this. We'll do whatever we do, but the Rebbe's in charge. And the Rebbe told the Jews no. On the 28th of Nisan, he said, in 1991, no, I've done everything I can do. The rest is up to you. I'll help, but the rest is up to you. And perhaps the Jews didn't take that seriously enough, because on 3 Tammuz, he disappeared from view. And it's just like in the battle, in Yehoshua's battle, when he asked for Hashem to stop the sun, or he actually asked the sun directly to stop. It's not like Hashem wasn't going to continue helping him. Hashem continued helping the Jewish people. Hashem threw huge meteors down from heaven on the Gibeonites, Hashem was helping, but he wasn't taking the Jews' job away. And so that's, I believe that, it seems clear to me that that's what's happening now, that the Rebbe disappeared from view. The Rebbe is actively helping, just like Hashem was throwing meteors. The Rebbe is throwing miracles left and right and left and right. But he's not taking the job away from us. The job is ours. Hashem designed the world that way, that we bring Mashiach through our hard work, through our helping another Jew, through our believing in Hashem, through our davening, through our saying Tehillim, through our being one with the Jews in Israel, through our uniting, through our being compassionate to another Jew. So now I'm just going to tell a little story. So I was listening to a lovely little class by Rabbi Zalman Tachtel, and he's Chabad of Kansas City, and he was saying very clearly that the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, it's not that he had power. The Rebbe has influence. The Rebbe influenced people. And that's exactly where power lies. Power doesn't lie in what Korach was doing, which is to try and take over power and take over the reins. True power is when you empower somebody else. And how do you empower somebody else? You empower somebody else by showing them who they are. You show them their strengths, and there's nothing greater than you can do for another human being. So, as I said many times, Jonathan Sacks, when he was a teenager, or a very young man in his 20s, he toured America, and he saw all the great Torah leaders. And the last one he saw was the Rebbe, and he said the Rebbe was different from all the others. Why was the Rebbe different from all the others? He said because when he walked out of the office with the Rebbe, he hadn't seen the Rebbe. He saw himself. The Rebbe showed him who Jonathan Sacks, could be. And that's exactly what the Rebbe does for people. He shows them their own strength. The Rebbe creates leaders. So anyway, the story goes that you might have heard the second half of the story, but not the first half of the story. In the summer of 1970, there was a kid who went from Israel. He's an Israeli kid, a 12-year-old, and he for various reasons, I don't know that he was from a firm family, but he ended up in maybe relatives or friends influenced him, and he ended up in a big Chabad camp in Montreal. It's called Ganezi in Montreal, and we had a Russian kid that lived with us part time, and we sent him there too. He went there too, and it's a very big camp, very 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 well known. But this Russian kid was have this sorry Israeli kid was having a very very hard time in camp because he spoke Hebrew. He didn't speak English, and he wasn't mixing with other kids, and he was just having if you've ever been in camp and had an isolated experience, you know that that's very 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 painful. You're away from your parents and you feel isolated. And so there was a director of Jewish studies, a young guy. His name was Michael Slavin. And it was his birthday, Michael Slavin's birthday. And very often Lubavitchers went to the Rebbe to 770 to get the Rebbe's blessing on their birthday for their next year. And so he did that. And the Rebbe said to him, when he came to New York, the Rebbe said, "There's a boy in your camp. His name is Yaakov, and he's from Israel. And I want you to look out after him. I don't think that he's mixing with the other kids. I think he's sort of isolated. And I would like you to look into it, and I would like you to befriend him and empower him." And the kid nobody had ever written to the Rebbe about this kid. Michael Slavin went back to camp, found this kid, and befriended him, and started learning Torah with him, and started doing things with him. And all of a sudden, the other kids started noticing this kid. They started noticing, hey, he can speak a little English, and you know what? He can teach me a little Hebrew. And they started noticing, you know what? This kid is good in soccer, and he became popular. And the Rebbe changed this kid's life. This kid decided to continue his schooling not in Israel, but to go to the Chabad Yeshiva in Montreal. And then he got married, and he became a shliach of the Rebbe in Vienna. And in 1990, when he was when did he go? Oh, in 1981, when he was 23, he was already a shliach, and he moved to Vienna with his wife. Yeah. So anyway, today he's the head of many, many, many Chabad institutions. So in 1994, when he'd been in Vienna, let's see, 1981 to 19, when he'd been there for like 13 years, a lady walked into his office, and she was an older woman, and she said, "I'd like to introduce myself. You think that you're the first emissary in Vienna of the Rebbe? You're wrong. You're the second. I'm the first." And she said, "My name is Margaret Chayes, and I'm the Rebbe's first emissary." And she explained that she came from that she came from her family in the past had been very very frum. I don't know how she became not so frum, but anyway, she was an opera star in Vienna. She went through the Holocaust. She got separated from her family, and she got on the last boat to the United States, and she lived in the United States after that. At a certain point, she after many many years in America, she had an audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and as soon as she walked in the door to see the Rebbe, looked at his face, and she started crying. She started crying about everything that had happened to her in her life, the Holocaust, all the horrible things that she went through. She had not cried about the Holocaust yet in her life, but she saw a face of compassion, and she just cried her eyes out. And when the Rebbe gave her a lot of empathy, and when their visit was finished, he said, "I want you to come back." She told him that she wants to She actually wants to return to Vienna. She wants to return to her roots. And the Rebbe encouraged her, and he said, when you're ready to go, come back to me because I'm going to have a mission for you. So in a couple of months, she was ready. A few months, she was ready. She came back to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, and this part of the story you may have heard, he said that there's a professor in Vienna, and I want you to go to him, and I want you to tell him, don't give up. Keep doing what you're doing. You are going to prevail. Don't care what anybody else says. Keep going. You're going to prevail. He said his name is Viktor Frankl. Now back then, Viktor Frankl was an absolute nobody. Nobody knew about him. He had a good position in the University of Vienna, but he was being ridiculed by all his colleagues when he gave classes explaining his point of view. His point of view was different from Freud. Freud said a person's biggest impetus, biggest impulse is pleasure seeking. And he said, no, a person's deepest impulse is the need for meaning. And he would get his colleagues made fun of him, even in classes. When he was giving classes, people would heckle him, and it was an awful experience. Anyway, she went to Vienna. She looked him up. He was not coming to yeshiva. He was not coming to the university anymore. He hadn't been there for 2 weeks. And she found his home address. She went to his home. She I don't know who opened the door, but she said she needed to speak to him. He came to the door. He looked at her, and she said, I have a message from you from Lubavitcher Rebbe in New York. And he said, don't give up. You will prevail. Don't care about what anybody else thinks right now. Just keep going. You're going to prevail. He burst into tears. He couldn't believe it. He never heard of this person. The Lubavitcher Rebbe didn't know him. He didn't know the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and nobody knew. And he told this woman, this is unbelievably remarkable. He had papers on his desk at that point because he was planning to resign. He had his emigration papers prepared to go to Australia, where he could sit on top of a mountain and just think his own thoughts and not be ridiculed. And he said, your message is absolutely remarkable. I am going to do it. I'm going to stick with it. I don't care if they laugh at me. I'm going to stick with it. And as we all know, the book he eventually produced and the philosophy that he eventually had, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, one of the most well-known books in the world. It's the Library of Congress said it's one of the 10 most influential books in the United States. And it's a big seller on Amazon and everything else. And so anyway, how do we influence a person ultimately? We don't influence a person by giving them our point of view. That's not the way to influence a person. The way to influence a person is the way that the Rebbe taught us to do it. And that is to show them their own strengths, to believe in them, and to show them who they are. That's the only way to get to somebody else. It's not by telling them they're wrong. It's not by telling them a better idea. It's certainly not by putting them down. It's by showing them their own strengths and your belief in them. So if there's anything we can learn from Gimmel Tammuz, in addition to the fact that it is, as the Rebbe said, it's the beginning of the redemption, but it's the kind of beginning that's only going to be apparent in hindsight. In addition to that, we can be like the Rebbe. We can be like the Rebbe and empower those whom we come in contact with. So I'm going to turn off the recording. I'm going to stop the recording. I don't know why it's over here at this time, and I'll take any questions.